All right, folks, welcome to another Buckmasters Outdoors podcast. I'm Jackie Bushman. We got a great guest today. Jason Koger from Kentucky's with us. Welcome to the podcast, my friend.
Thank you very much, man. This is an honor to talk to you and tell a story together. Obviously, my entire life since I was a little kid, I watched you, and first time we've been in front of each other, and man, this is it's an honor. So thank you for
Yes,
having me do
sir.
this.
You know, it's getting really to be a laughing joke. Every time I see somebody, they go, "Hey, man, I've been watching you since I was in diapers." So I've been getting there going, it's a compliment, but and then I go, "Dang, I'm old." Okay, and this is our 37th year coming up to be on national television, and it's just been an honor and a pleasure to entertain folks over the years. And if the good Lord let me keep going and people want to watch me keep screwing up on TV, by gosh, I'll keep doing it. So,
Doing
but
it.
thank you for being a fan. And Kentucky, man, y'all got some big deer up there. Who got you started hunting way back?
So my dad never hunted. My great
Mine didn't either.
uncle, yep. So my great uncle, he hunted, and we had a place in Greenville, Kentucky, and he would have me come over and just mess with some cattle all the time. And one day he was like, "Well, let's go hunting," and we went deer hunting. And absolutely fell in love with deer hunting, and I hunted deer for a long time before I even started turkey and all that kind of stuff. And man, it's just it's the peace you get when you're in the woods and just being able to enjoy God's country, man. It's amazing. So I was very, very blessed that he showed me and taught me about hunting. And man, now I just try to do it and try to introduce other people to it. I love it.
Well, it's a unique sport. My grandfather got me going on my mama's side, and my dad was just a big tennis player and a basketball, and he just wasn't a big outdoorsman. And my grandfather kind of got me going. We started brim fishing on the bed on full moons, and I got bit there, and then we started squirrel hunting. So, everybody has their own story of who introduced them, and a lot of times it's not your daddy. It could be your uncle, it could be your grandfather, it could be a friend. So, well, that's cool. That's cool. Well, talk to me a little bit about your family.
So I was raised up in Owensboro, Kentucky. Actually, it's Utica. It's just right outside of Owensboro.
Mm-hmm.
I was raised up. My mom's family farmed, so they farm about 2,300 acres of corn and soybeans. So where I was raised up, it's my house, and then it was my uncle, which I had a cousin that was my age, and
Mm-hmm.
then next door to him was my grandfather, and next door to him was my other uncle, and I had a cousin there as a year older. So we all was raised up like brothers out here. I don't have a brother; I have a sister.
Mm-hmm.
But my dad, he was a drill sergeant in the army.
Oh, that's
It was
cool.
very interesting. Yep.
All right, you have an interesting story to tell, and we at Buckmasters have been blessed over the years to work with a lot of disabled folks. Okay, you had an accident, but I can tell you one thing: that accident has not slowed Jason up one bit. Talk to me a little bit about it.
So right after graduating high school, I went to Murray State University. I used to race cars, and there's a reason I tell all these stories. But I used to race cars, worked on a farm. I understand how mechanically how things work. I came home, wanted to get married. I found my wife. We wanted to have 4 kids. That was always a dream of ours. And matter of fact, another dream was to be able to move into my mom and dad's house and raise my kids the way I was raised, and my cousin do the same. And so we got pregnant. We had our first daughter, and her name's Billy Grace. And then not long after that, we had our second daughter. And when we became pregnant, I was living in Owensboro in a little 900 square foot home. And I told my wife, I said, when we get pregnant with our second child, I'm going to go talk to mom and dad about moving into our house and the house I was raised up in. So once I did that, I came out, and I really didn't give my mom and dad an option. I told them they had to leave. And so I bought my mom and dad's house. Everything was going as planned. And then March 1st of 2008, it was the first warm day of the year. And, I'd been working actually 7/12s right there leading up to this. So I hadn't done a whole lot with my kids. My oldest daughter at the time was 21 months old, and my youngest was 3 months old. And I woke up that morning. It was a Saturday morning. And I told my wife, I said, "Hey, if we go into Owensboro at the mall, they have this little train ride that you can, go on or whatever. And I said, I'd like to take the girls and go on this little train ride. So we went to Owensboro and put them on this little train that went inside the mall and came home. And I told my wife, I said, I want to put the girls down for a nap because I haven't done it in a long time because I was working so many hours. And so I laid them down for a nap and then got that done. And I told my wife, I said, I'm going to go outside and do some chores to catch up on things around the house. And so some young boys had come over and my brother-in-law had come over too. He was fixing to get married. And my wife was a graphic design major. So she was wanting to do his wedding invitations. So when they came in the house, Jeannie said, hey, can you take the boys outside and just, play basketball, whatever. I'm going to help my brother make these wedding invitations. I said, yeah, that's absolutely fine. I love kids. So walked outside and we were playing basketball, whatever. And one of the boys said, hey, don't you have a four-wheeler? And I said, yeah, I got a four-wheeler. And they said, will you take us on a ride? And I thought for a minute, I was like, well, I said, if you go in there and ask if you can, that's fine. So they came in the house and asked if I could take them on a quick four-wheeler ride, and literally around my grandfather's farm. And they came out and said, yeah. So got the four-wheeler out. And like I said, where we live, so when you leave my house and go behind my house, there's a gravel lane, and it makes a U shape, and it ends up at my grandfather's grain bins. And this ride was going to be a 5-minute ride, like super 5-10 minutes and be right back. So I told my wife, I said, while you're doing these wedding invitations, I'll take them around the farm one time. And I'll, as soon as I get back, I need to get started on some of these honeydew projects that I have. And so I took off and was going super slow, had 3 kids with me. I had one straddling right behind me. And then I had one on the left fender and one on the right fender. Took off behind my house. The first corner is to the left. I turned that corner. And then in the background, there's a hill. And it's a field, and that's the way the sun was, blaring. But that field was corn that year, so the corn stubbles were still up. And so I'm going across that little gravel lane, super slow, and I'm kind of looking to my right, and I happened to turn around, and I seen something. I didn't know exactly what it was at first, and when I hit my brake, this thing that I hit, I noticed that it was some kind of a cord or line. And it hit the front rack of my four-wheeler, and it bounced off. And then when it came back, it hit me in the chest and landed on top of my gas tank in between my body and my handlebars. Well, then I stopped and I looked, and it was a down power line. I started kind of trying to decide, like, what just happened. It kind of was super quick. And so I looked to my right, and these 2 lines went to a field pump, which pulls water out of the field whenever the crop's planted, and in March, nothing's planted. I look over to my left, and the telephone pole is kind of leaning towards me, and the guide wire was broke. So the guide wire broke, which made the pole lean, so both lines were swooping, and the lowest point was right where I was, which was about 30 inches off the ground. So I sat there for a minute. I'm not an electrician. I don't know much about electricity, and I'm like, I've always been told if you're on rubber tires, you're okay. So I told the kids, I said, back off of me a little bit. Do not get off this four-wheeler. And I said, I don't want you touching me. And I said, I got to do something. So I looked across the field, and I could see my cousin in the backyard. So I got his attention. He came down there, and he was right behind me. And at this time, before he got to me, I had decided that I needed to pick the line up enough to back off to go above the handlebars. So I picked it up. I started backing up, and I let go of it. And about this time, it was, just, I don't know, a few inches in front of my bumper, but it wasn't in between my body and the handlebars at this time. And so my cousin comes down there, and I told him, I said, man, I don't know what to do. I said, we got this line that's 30 inches off the ground. It's the first warm day of the year. I'm afraid some kids are going to come riding four-wheelers or dirt bikes. And if I would have been running wide open, I started thinking about decapitation, somebody hitting this line and getting decapitated. And I said, I don't know if it's not on. I've already hit it. It's already touched me. I said, it's going to the field pump. And I showed him that the guide wire was broke. And I turned around and I was looking at him. and I was standing up on the four wheeler, not on the seat, but like just standing up. And I told him, I said, man, I wish that line was this high. And I just like literally just kind of threw my arm out saying, I wish it was this high. And I was looking at him. And then the next thing I know, I felt this vibration going through my body. And everything went dark, everything went black. I found out a lot about electricity since then, but I took 7,200 volts of electricity.
Wow.
And the electric chair is only 6,900, so it's more than the electric chair. It was enough electricity that it shut my entire neighborhood down. And so anyway, I took that electricity for 30 seconds. So when you get electrocuted for 30 seconds, and then the breaker kicks, and then it'll stay off for 30 seconds, and then if you're draped over it, or like if a tree limb or something's against the power line, it will come back on and it'll go back off. And it does that until whatever that object is that's on it is off. So I took 7,200 volts for 30 seconds. It completely stopped my heart. They said that whenever the power went off and it threw me off the back of the four wheeler, they said I either hit the ground hard enough or it was enough electricity. It was almost like using paddles that it started my heart back up. So my heart, and actually the doctor said that was probably the best thing that could happen, because if your heart goes into a flutter,
Mm-hmm.
your body doesn't know that your heart's not working, and then you start losing oxygen and you end up dying. Whereas when your heart stops, your body's like, hey, something's wrong, and it fired back up. So I immediately woke up. I felt like I was on fire. I was trying to climb down into a ditch. My cousin was trying to pull me out of the ditch so that I didn't get down in the water. And I remember my uncle coming down. My cousin had already called my uncle. I remember him coming down. I remember the first fire truck, the police, the ambulance. I remember all that. And I remember them putting me on this stretcher and loading me into the back of the ambulance. And I remember my wife coming up, and she got in the ambulance with me, and we took off towards Owensboro to the hospital. And my wife had no idea that I was electrocuted. And I tell this story too. It's, we all are super busy people. You know what I mean? We all have stuff going on in our life. And when things don't go our way, you get really upset, and sometimes you really don't know. And I think about this a lot now, that my wife was at home working on a computer, making a wedding invitation, and had been working on this for a month. And she was right in the middle of making changes, and all of a sudden the power goes out at the house. And when that happens, you get angry. It's like, I just spent 2 months or a month or an hour working on this, and I just lost everything that I've been doing the last hour. When she had no idea the reason that went off is because her husband's, 500 yards from her, about to die, and it really hit home to me that, when people, they don't understand why things happen, and something like that hits, and it's like, there's a reason for everything. You know what I mean? And,
Mm-hmm.
so anyway, she got in the ambulance with me, and we were heading to Owensboro, and I told her, she's like, what happened? And I said, I got electrocuted. I told her I got into that power line, and I told her, I said, but everything's going to be okay. And I told her, I said, my grandfather that lived at the grain bins, he had passed away 3 months before this happened. My granddad got his left arm caught in a corn picker and had a left hook. So he was an arm amputee my entire life. He was actually 29 years old. I was 29 when I got hurt. He got hurt on the same farm as I did, just different ways. And I remember telling my wife, it's like, Papa lived his entire life without an arm. And I looked down to my left thumb, and that's where electricity came out. So my left thumb was just barely hanging on. And I told Jenny, I said, I'm going to lose my thumb, but like, it's really not that big of a deal, because that's all I'm going to do is lose a thumb. And Papa lost his entire arm. And I went over that over and over and over, telling her that, going to Owensboro. So we get to Owensboro Hospital. I walk in, doctors and surgeons are running in and out of the hospital, or out of my room. And a doctor comes in, he said, son, we got to get you out of here. And I said, okay, what do you mean? And he said, I already have a helicopter on its way, life flight, and you have to go to a burn unit. So you're either going to go to Louisville, Kentucky, or Vanderbilt Hospital to the burn unit. And I remember telling him, I was like, well, let's go to Nashville because my dad's got some doctors in Nashville. I'm like, let's go to Nashville. And he said, son, it's whoever calls us back first. We got to get you out of here. And you're going the first place it calls. So luckily Vanderbilt called. I remember getting loaded up in a helicopter, feet first. I remember my feet touching the front windshield of the helicopter. I remember when they shut the back door that there was a nurse, and I was basically laying in her lap looking up at her. I had a nurse to my right. My left shoulder was touching the window of the helicopter, and then everything between my right arm and the right window was all the equipment to keep somebody alive. I remember going up in the air. Vanderbilt called back first, so I went to Nashville, Tennessee. And from where the hospital is to Nashville is south, and I live south of the hospital. So I remember going over my house and still seeing people down there, like while I was on the helicopter. They never would tell me much of what was going on. And then the nurse that was that I was looking up at, she told me, she said, hey, we're going to go on and prep you, get you ready for surgery. We're going to stick a pick in your jugular vein. We're going to go in and cath you. And once you get to the hospital, they can go on and start, medications or whatever. But they wouldn't give me anything until we got to Nashville. But so they stuck the line in my jugular vein basically so that the medicine could go quick. And then when they cathed me, I remember one of them holding that urine bag, and I remember seeing this liquid go into this bag, and it looked like Dr. Pepper. And I had no idea what it was at that time, but I found out when you get electrocuted, it burns you from the inside out. Wow. And it causes poisonous toxins inside your body and blood, and all that has to go somewhere, and it goes through your kidneys. So that Dr. Pepper was my urine, which was all the blood and poison going through my body. And at the time, I didn't know, but what that means is your kidneys are shutting down. Mm-hmm. So the amputation or whatever, the only concern they had for me was my kidneys at the time. So I remember landing on top of Vanderbilt Hospital. I remember going down an elevator into a hallway. I remember going into a room that looked like a morgue. Everything was stainless steel. I remember, people coming in, and at that moment, to be honest with you, I didn't know if I was alive. I didn't know if that was what you see when you die. But that room was called hydro, and hydro is where they take a pressure washer and they wash your dead skin off of you. So my entire right arm was 3rd-degree burns. And they completely basically used a pressure washer and started washing all the dead skin off of my arm without any kind of medication because my wife hadn't got to Vanderbilt. I'm 2 hours from Nashville driving. And they didn't know if my wife would sign release forms to do whatever. So they waited on her to get there. And, the doctor, Dr. Jeffrey Guy was my doctor. He basically walked down to the waiting room and told my wife. So you got to remember, my wife is thinking I'm just going to get a thumb amputated and that's it. And that's what I thought. It's like no big deal. So she gets there and Dr. Guy walks in. He said, Jenny, I don't have time to really explain stuff. I need you to sign a release form for me to amputate whatever I have to amputate. I need you to sign a release form for a blood transfusion if I need to do that. And if you don't sign this in the next 10 minutes, your husband's about to die. So it went to obviously, her, do I sign these papers? And absolutely, like I want my husband here. So she signed papers. I immediately went to surgery, and they gave me some kind of medicine to make me forget that one procedure of the hydro room. So I don't remember it. I just remember pieces of it, but immediately went into surgery, and they opened up. They cut my left arm from my elbow down to the end of my hand. And when they opened it up, he said it looked like a shotgun had went off on the inside of my left arm. All my tendons were wrapped up around my wrist, and he went on and amputated my left. And then on the right, he knew that it was bad enough, so he ended up amputating the right immediately that first night.
Wow. I mean, that's the damnedest story I've ever heard, man. And you're still here.
I'm here. Yep.
God didn't want you.
Nope.
Now, let me ask
Nope.
you this. I know you said you had the kids. What did the kids get hurt too?
No, none of them got hurt. I'm sure they seen something they didn't want to see.
Uh-huh.
Same thing as my cousin. My cousin doesn't talk about it a whole lot.
Right.
He told me it looked like 4th of July was coming off of me. It's interesting because it came out the bottom of my right foot.
Mm-hmm.
They found my tennis shoe 30 feet from where I was.
Wow.
And just about a month ago, this was 16 years ago when it happened. About a month ago, a friend of mine called me and he said, "Hey, I found something in my closet that's yours." And I said, "All right, what is it?" And he said, "When you went to the hospital in Owensboro, they handed me all your stuff, before you got on the helicopter. And I really forgot I had it." And he gave me this box, and it had my tennis shoe where the hole was through it. My sock had a hole in it, and my pants and my shirt. And, if you look at my pants, it's like little burn holes, like almost like when you're welding and you get them little sparks all over my pants. And it was like, when I looked at that, it was like, man, I know people think that I'm good to go now, and I am, but man, that day that's pretty serious. You know what I mean? Like,
Oh, absolutely.
I was so close to death.
Yes, you
And
were.
and I was when I went into that surgery, I was put into an induced coma for 3 days. I had no clue what they were going to do to me. And I went through 29 amputations in 3 days because they would just cut a little bit more and a little bit more until they got the infection in order to save my kidneys, basically. And, I tell people that my accident's not my story, really. It's what I've done after my accident, how I've handled it all. That's the inspiring part of it.
Well, Jason, did you ever figure out why the line was down? Was there a storm or something that brought the line down? Did y'all ever figure that
So,
out?
no, a lot of people, not facts, but the guide wire broke and it's on the edge of a field. So, they had talked about, is it the fertilizer they use? Maybe, you got that yellow pipe.
Yeah.
And then the lines inside of it. So did moisture get in there? Did it rot? Did it corrode? Is it, fertilized? We had an ice storm that year. We had a wind storm that year. But for whatever reason, the guide wire broke. And then when it broke, that's the only thing holds a post straight in the air.
Yes.
So it just kind of tilted over. And then once it tilted, that line was just swooping. And I don't even know how long it was down like that. Well, matter of fact,
that's what I was going to ask you. Was it just that day, or had you ridden that way, recently?
Yeah, I hadn't, but there were some kids in the neighborhood that went through there a day or 2 or 3 before I did, and it was down, and there was 3 different bikes, and I don't blame these kids at all. Like, I don't want anybody to ever think that. I mean, they didn't know whatever, but each one of them picked that line up and went underneath it.
Wow.
Each one of them.
Wow.
And it's like, man, that could have been them. I mean, I think the biggest part of my story is, like I said, whenever I woke up, and I go back and talk about my dad a lot, my mom and dad, just because my dad was a super strong person, to be a drill sergeant in the Army, and just he taught me to never give up, never stop, come up with a goal or a dream and reach it. Like, whatever you got to do it, but be a good person. We've always, I was raised up in church, so I've always been a Christian.
Yeah.
I didn't know any different of not knowing who God was. So I knew I had that. I had a great family, but when I woke up 3 days after, being electrocuted, I was laying flat on a bed, and I seen the nurse when I woke up, and I told her, I was like, "Where's my dad?" And I had feeding tubes and tubes hanging out of my arms, and I mean, I was hooked up to everything. And my dad walked in. I was laying flat on this bed, strapped down, and my dad comes in. He sat down with me, and I said, "How bad is it?" And he looked down at me and he said, "Jason, I don't know how we're going to get through this, but we will. Like, we've always had faith. God will get us through this. It's going to be super hard, and I'm going to be right beside you." But he said, in order to save your life, they had to amputate both of your arms. And, a lot of things, it actually broke my neck and broke my back as well. That's why I was laying flat on the bed. I had no clue that my arms were gone. And it hit me that, I got a 21-month-old and a 3-month-old little girl home. I had both my parents my entire life. I still have them today. And, and I have God, I got my faith. And I told myself right then, no matter what, my girls need me. They need a dad. So, you got to figure out like what's this new life going to be like?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I'm laying in this bed. Uh, I feel like at that moment that my grandfather was the first amputee in the world, and I felt like I was the second upper limb amputee because I've never seen anybody like this before. And I was like, who do you reach out to? Who do you talk to? And you have doctors and nurses saying, well, this is going to be like this. And then you're sitting there thinking, well, how do you know? Because you got your arms, you got this. And, but I wanted to be positive, and I was positive.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so hearing my dad say that everything's going to be okay, I knew I had that peace that it would be okay.
Mm-hmm.
Even though you don't know. I mean, you don't know how it's going to be okay, but you just know it's going to be okay. And I remember going into my hospital room that, after 3 days of being in a coma, the room that I got, and meeting my doctor for the very first time. And Dr. Guy walks in my room and he sits down with me, and he was like, "Hey, I want to go over some stuff with you. But he said, there's one thing I want to do." He said, "You're going to be in this hospital for months." And he said, "I want you to think of one goal that you have, and I want to help you reach that one goal." And he said, "I want it to be realistic. I want you to seriously think about it." And he said, "I'll give you a couple of days and tell me what you want to do." And I remember him standing up, fixing to walk out of the door. And I remember saying, "Dr. Guy, I know what I want." And I remember him coming back in and sitting down with me. And he said, "How do you know what you want already?" And I said, "Because there's one thing that really matters to me." And I said, here I got a 21-month-old and a 3-month-old little girl. And I said, I have to be able to hold them. That's it. And I said, if I can do that, I mean, everything else is going to be fine. You know what I mean? And I remember, him and myself just crying, I mean, is that going to be possible? And I think it was the next day, maybe 2 days after, whatever. Dr. Guy walks in. He says, "Jason, your kids are here to see you." And he said, "I want to go get them and bring them in your room." And I looked at him. I said, "No, you're not." And he said, "What do you mean I'm not?" And I said, "I don't want my kids coming in this room." I'm like, I don't have hands. I got feeding tubes, heart monitors, tubes hanging out of my arms. I mean, catheters. Like, I'm hooked up to everything. And I said, I don't want them. They're already going to be scared of me when they see my arms gone. And I don't want them to see me like this. And I said, I want to go to a waiting room. And he said, "Jason, I can't get you to a waiting room." I said, "Yes, you can." He said, "No, I can't." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Because I'm going to have to pull your feeding tube and all that kind of stuff." And I said, "Well, you put them in, take them out." And I talked him into taking my feeding tube out. And I'll never forget the feeling of a feeding tube coming from your stomach out of your nose, and the catheter came out, and, everything that he could unhook me from came out. And I went to the waiting room, and I know I sent Cody a picture, but that very first day is the very first day I held my kids. And I knew right then that life was going to be okay, because I reached that one goal that I had.
That's awesome. Well, let's talk a little bit about this. So everything's happened. Let's talk about getting into the prosthetics that had opportunities. I mean, what different ideas did they have for either one arm, both arms, or whatever? Go through that, because you've got stuff there. You got stuff you can use, and you're
Yep.
you're you're back to doing different things with just a different way. Correct?
Yep. Absolutely. So even though I was supposed to be in the hospital for 2 or 3 months,
Mm-hmm.
I was only in the hospital for 12 days and I was released. I came
Wow.
home, came home
Wow.
12 days. Yeah. Came home 12 days after my accident. I mean, I hit all the things that Dr. Guy wanted me to do.
Good for you.
12 days I get home. The very first day I get home, my wife goes to town to get some groceries. And I'm sitting in my house and my mom's with me. And I said, where's the keys to my truck? And this is 12 days after losing my hands. And she said, I don't know. And she said, they're right here. So what do you want them for? And I said, I just want the keys to my truck. And she said, okay, well, what do you mean do with them? And I said, put them in my mouth. And I said, you got to leave me alone and let me figure stuff out. I went outside. I got in the truck in my truck, and I got it started. And it might have took hours. I think I used my feet, my teeth, whatever I could do.
Yeah.
And I stuck my nubs in the steering wheel, and I drove my truck the very first day, 12 days after my accident, around my grandfather's farm. And I'm so determined to be, the best version of me that I can be,
Mm-hmm.
that I already wanted to teach myself. And I didn't know anything about prosthetics at the time, but I wanted to be able to do all this stuff. So I did that. And then I started kind of Googling and, getting on the internet about prosthetics. And
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't feed myself. I couldn't dress myself. And I found out about bionic hands. And I was like, that's what I want. I want those bionic hands. So I called a prosthetist in Nashville and I said, hey, I found out about these hands. They're called Touch Bionics. And I said, I'd really like to get those. I told him my story, and he instantly told me, he said, it'll never happen. And I said, what do you mean it's never going to happen? And he said, insurance will say no. It's too expensive. Those hands are $150,000 a piece. Like, it's just not going to happen. And I was like, well, can we try? He was like, yeah, but I'm telling you, don't get your hopes up. It's not going to happen. So we tried to get these prosthetics, and it took a really long time, but I got denied multiple times.
Mm-hmm.
And I found out the person that denied me, and they said it wasn't medically necessary for me to have these hands that I wanted. And I remember finding out who this person was, and I reached out to him. And I told him, I said, hey, I told him who it was. I said, can you come to Owensboro, Kentucky? And they're like, no, why would I want to do that? And I said, I just want you to hang out with me for 24 hours. And I said, if you'll do that, I want to tie your hands behind your back, and I want to see what you can do. And I said, if you can't do it, I can't do it. Like, I deserve to have what I want. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I deserve this. And I told him, I said, I don't know what I'll ever be able to do with prosthetics. I don't know how they work. But I said, if I can hold my kid's hand to walk across the street, and if that's the only thing I can do,
Mm-hmm.
$500,000 is worth me to have that. You know what I mean? That's worth it to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, I think I pulled a few heartstrings for him, and he ended up calling back, and I got accepted to get these bionic hands. And I ended up becoming the first person in the world with 2 bionic hands, just because my insurance said yes, because I fought for it. I also have the body pirate stuff that people's had since Civil War days. I have them as well. But leading up, even though I got accepted to have them, it was a long time before I could get prosthetics. So I was trying to do everything for myself. You know what I mean? I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to be able to dress myself. I wanted to be able to do. And it's funny. My first trip to Owensboro was Hobby Lobby as a family, and my wife wanted to go shopping. And here, Billy Gray's 21 months old. I'm like, well, I can carry her around. I have no prosthetics. Campbell and Jenny can go shopping. So we're like 3 rows over from where Jenny is. And I'm carrying Billy, and she starts kicking me. And I set her down, and she runs away from me. And she said, and I yelled at her. I said, Billy Grace, get back over here. And she turned around, and she come running towards me and had these arms wide open, like she's going to jump in my arms, give me this big hug and kiss, like the best moment ever. Until she got to me, she grabbed me by my pants, pulled my pants down to my ankles. So I'm standing in the middle of Hobby Lobby trying to figure out, like, Billy, you got to pull my pants up. And she won't do it. So I had to wobble 3 rows over to find my wife to pull my pants up. And my wife was like, well, that's embarrassing. I'm like, yeah, it's embarrassing. And I said, it could have been worse, though. At least my underwear stayed up. You know what I mean?
There you go.
Well, but so I tried to start then. Like, I need to figure out how to do this stuff. And I end up making a leg brace that you use for your leg. I put it on my residual limb, and I had a fork duct tape to the end of it. And that's how I taught myself how to eat at first. And, I just, until I could get prosthetics, I was trying everything I could do.
Sure. Well, pull that up right there. You've got a hook. Is that correct? Can I see?
Yep.
So I see the hook.
So this is a myoelectric hook,
right?
Which is battery powered. I got my kids' pictures on.
There you go. Yeah.
And then this is the hand.
Okay.
I have a hand for the left too.
Oh, you do? Okay, that's what I was going to ask.
I do. Yep. And they both work the same. So when I feel like I raise my wrist in there, that's what opens it. So it's a muscle.
I'll be down.
And then when I feel like I lower my wrist, it closes.
How about that?
And then when I co-contract, so I hit 2 muscles at the same time, and it tells the wrist to start working and not the hand. So when I lower my wrist, I'm just holding my wrist down.
Yeah.
And it just keeps on going until I stop, and then I raise my wrist up. And then I can also
isn't that amazing? Though?
Oh yeah, I can stall fingers out, so I can hold different fingers up and stop them. It's got an Apple app for it, so I can speed it up, slow it down, make it do different stuff. It's all titanium, so it's super strong. And the hook the same way. It's all muscle, so it works exact same way. Rotators. I have a hook so I can get inside my pocket. Sure. Because the hand's bigger and it's hard to get inside a pocket.
Yeah.
But one of the biggest stories that really hit me that life is going to be okay was the first time I got in the woods. I got hurt March 1st, 2008. Mm-hmm. So the beginning of April, you know what season that is?
Oh yeah. Turkey
season. Buddy calls me and he says, hey, let's go turkey hunting. So this is a month and a half after my accident, losing 2 arms.
Really?
And I'm like, man, I can't go turkey hunting. And he's like, yeah, you can. I cannot go turkey hunting. And I thought about it. I was like, you know what? I can go in the woods and I can sit next to my buddy and I can watch my buddy kill a turkey. And that's just as good as me pulling a trigger. And I thought, you know what? I am going to go. I called my doctor, got permission. I mean, I'm still bleeding, still got, wrapped up and no prosthetics. And so my buddy, he tells me, he said, why don't you stay the night with me? Because he's 1 county over. And he said, stay the night with me and then we'll go turkey hunting. And I told him, I said, Sam, I'm good with that. But I said, dude, I still can't use the bathroom on my own. I can't feed myself. Like, there's a lot of stuff I still cannot do. And he said, man, you're like a brother to me. I'll take care of you. So I went and spent the night with him that night. And we were in his living room watching TV. And my mind was, I'm going to watch him kill a turkey. And it's going to be great. So he comes in the living room at night. And he lays a shotgun in my lap. And he said, you're going to hunt tomorrow. I said, dude, how am I going to hunt tomorrow? I have no prosthetics. There's no way. And he said, I think I got it figured out. So he took the 2 screws out of the butt of the shotgun and he put a ratchet strap on it, ran those screws back in it, and he strapped it to my shoulder. He had a tripod on the front with a radiator hose clamp holding it on the shotgun. And he put a string from the trigger to my mouth. And I sat in his living room and I dry fired that gun several times. And I knew I couldn't turn to the right. I could only turn to the left. And I told him, he said, we're going to kill a turkey tomorrow. And I knew that if a turkey would come from my left and it had to work out perfect, that I'd be able to do it. And I've killed longbeards before, before my accident. I've killed some big deer before my accident. But the first turkey I seen that morning was a Jake, and it came from my left. And when it got right in front of my shotgun barrel, I killed my first turkey, and it was a month and a half after my accident. And you can only imagine how excited you get when you kill a turkey or a deer or whatever. man, that was a game changer, because I never imagined I could ever hunt again. I
Yeah.
mean, the passion I had for the outdoors, I thought was over.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't realize it was just fixing to begin.
That is so cool. And to me, just looking at your prosthetic, somebody invented that. Somebody invented that. Somebody was smart enough to figure out if somebody in your situation, they had something mechanically that could get you back to doing what you normally did in a different way. That's God's plan in itself, is that somebody was smart enough to come up with something like that.
Yep.
Amazing. All right, you got probably that's the best story I've heard. And I've been around a lot of folks that had disabilities, and we've helped a lot of folks. That's the damnedest thing I've ever heard. But Jason, if somebody's listening, as we close this thing up, if somebody's listening to this podcast and they've had an accident or they got a disability and they love the outdoors and they're going, there's no way I can do it again. That's not true, is it? What would you tell them?
No, not at all. Anything's possible. I hear people tell me all the time that when something bad happens to you, that God will never give you more than you can handle. I've heard that over and over, and I don't believe that. I feel like God can help you through something when you ask him to help you.
Mm-hmm.
When you ask for his guidance, you ask him for a path and be beside me, walk this path with me, then he will give you the strength to get through something whenever you need it. Things has happened in my life the last 16 years that I cannot even imagine how it would have been without God.
Mm-hmm.
I did an episode on Hawaii 5-0. I was a bad guy, and I killed a bunch of people, and they couldn't find my fingerprints. So that was the gist of the story. Yeah.
Book 'em, Dano. That was my favorite. Book 'em, Dano.
Yeah. Well, back in they did an episode called the Hookman episode in the 70s.
Yeah.
And it was a fan favorite, so I did the new version of the Hookman episode.
How about that? That's one of my favorite shows way back.
Yep. Became really good friends with RoboCop from the 80s.
Yeah.
And I tell people like him, for instance, he called me one day and said, I want to come to Owensboro, Kentucky and spend the weekend with you. So he came here, and I asked him why. And he told me, he said, I meet people all the time, but I've never met anybody like you. And I want to surround myself with people like you. I've been able to, as far as anybody knows, I was the first in the world to kill a bear with a crossbow.
Wow.
4 years ago, on private ground in Kentucky, I killed a 187-inch typical white, buck with a crossbow. I tell people it's like, when you talk about how things work. So I shoot a 10-point crossbow, and people don't understand how important it is for me to use the way you can cock and decock a 10-point. Is so easy, man. It's so easy. So I can hunt on my own because of technology like this. It's super hard to pull a regular bow and arrow back, but I would rather use a crossbow than I would a gun anymore. I've killed 4 or 5 really good bucks the last few years using a crossbow. And you know how hard it is to kill a 187-inch deer with 2 hands, or even just to see one.
I agree.
Yes, it is possible to do anything you want to do.
Wow.
Now, today, I work with the company, the Bionic Hand Company. So this is the 5th generation hand. I've been the first person in the world 5 times with the newest Bionic hand. I get to work with the engineers out of Iceland and Scotland.
Really?
Yep. And they're working on a Bionic hand now that's going to be new. Last April, an engineer from Scotland and an engineer from Iceland came to Owensboro to see how I do what I do. And one of them said, what would you do if we weren't here today? And I said, well, I'd be turkey hunting because it's turkey season. And they said, well, we've never heard a shotgun go off, and we've never even heard a turkey gobble. So I took them 2 engineers, and they got to see me and film me shoot a turkey for the first time.
Really?
Yep.
Wow.
I get amputees all over the world to reach out to me. I'm considered one of the best prosthetic users in the world right now. But I want to help people be better. That's my goal. On the podcast that I do, on everything that I talk about, is I want people to know that life is it's not over. And whatever you want out of life, you have to go for it. You know what I mean? Like every
Yep.
single person is going to go through a hard time,
Yep.
whether it's financials, a divorce, whether it's an accident, a death in a family, whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
everybody's going to go through a hard time because God's never told us it's going to be easy.
I agree.
And you have to understand that things happen for a reason. And probably the number one question I get is, would you go back to March 1st, 2008, and this accident never happened? And I would say absolutely not. And it's not because of the cool stuff I've been able to do or the
Mm-hmm.
cool people I've been able to meet. It's that I truly believe I'm in a spot, I'm on this path that every morning I wake up, I'm happy. I'm happy to get up. I'm happy to do what I do. I'm happy to be able to talk to other amputees and inspire people. And it's exciting for me to get up every day. And I
Mm-hmm.
know this is my path. I know this is what I'm supposed to do. And yes, I went through a very hard time for a year and a half,
Mm-hmm.
but it was all worth it at the end of the day because God never messes up a plan.
No.
Never. I've had an opportunity to write a book, and I'm going to send you one of these.
Oh
I wrote a
man.
book,
Yeah.
and if you'll see what it's called, Handed
Handed
a
a
Greater
greater
Purpose.
purpose. Well, Jason, my friend, this has been awesome. And if somebody's listening to this podcast, I hope this has touched you because Jason has basically said, I can do anything. God has given me a plan. He gave me the hand that I was dealt. I didn't go backwards, I went forward. And look at you. You're hunting. And, you put your keys in the car after, 2 weeks with your teeth. You weren't giving up. And that's what I hope anybody listening, if you know a friend or somebody that is disabled and they don't know how to, find prosthetics or just get back out in the outdoors or just do life. Jason, how can folks reach out to you? Is there a way to reach out to you if they want to talk to you and you can help them? Is there a way to do that?
Yes, absolutely. So I have a website. It's just jasonkoger.com. That's Koger, jasonkoger.com. And then I'm on all the social media stuff, Instagram, Facebook, even TikTok.
I got you.
I am very easy to find, and I'm
Okay.
very easy to get a hold of. I'm very, very willing to talk to anybody and share a story with them and help them, even if it's not amputations. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter to me. I want to help people. I love helping people. So super
Well,
easy to get a hold of.
all right. Well, my friend, thank you. What an
Thank you.
inspiring story. And God really has a plan for you. And I appreciate you taking time. And, folks, again, another great Buckmasters podcast. But I'll have to say, that one right there is leading the charts right there. So, Jason, thank you, my friend. Tell all those folks up in Kentucky, keep watching the Buckmasters. And this old poot right here will keep messing up as long as y'all keep watching.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, my friend. You're the best.
Thank you.